Well, good afternoon, everyone. Michael, Soothing here. Today, as I've promised many times, I'm going to discuss a little tour around on this map, this Oregon map. My apologies for being so long between videos. I've been feeling very poorly because of chemo, and that's why I don't want to appear on screen. I'm not vain, but I'm just an old guy, but I am not willing to show up on screen at the moment, but I am relaxed, and I am here to relax you. This map is too big for me to do my usual down shot, so I'm just going to start by showing you the size of Oregon, talk about it a little bit, and then later we'll zoom in on the part I really want to discuss, those parts that I am familiar with, which involves western Oregon. But I'm just going to note for you, in case you don't live close by, Oregon borders on 4 states and of course the Pacific Ocean. There's the ocean right there. I think I see a humpback whale surfacing there. Yeah, there it is. They sometimes surface all along here. I live in this area of the coast, kind of central Oregon, central coastal Oregon. But I'm familiar with most of western Oregon, and I'm only going to show you the parts that I've been to, basically, which is, let me back up, kind of all of this section up here, all the way up. And the states that Oregon borders is, of course, Washington State up on the north here. And then we have Idaho over here on the east. Idaho. This is kind of deserty country out here. High plains or desert. Then if we go down further, we've got Nevada. So you can head down Highway 95 and eventually come to places like Las Vegas and Reno and such, or Las Vegas I should say, because for Reno you'd have to go down Highway 395 there and go down. Then of course it also borders on California here, the very high tax state. And so let me reposition the camera so that we can have a detailed discussion. I think we're going to go in a loop, and we're going to talk about this area. We'll talk some about this whole area here, going all the way up here, and all the way over here, and then all the way down the coast. And I'm going to add some photos in to show you what I'm talking about. Just quick photos that I've taken myself, basically, most of them. Maybe a couple are stock. Let's reposition and go on a little tour of that part of Oregon. Now, the reason I'm not talking about all this out here, I haven't been there yet, but someday I will visit all this territory, and then I'll do a follow-up video and talk about that. Look, you can see all the counties. Here's Lake Horny County. Oh no, wait, that's Harney. Okay, let's get it right. And Crook County. You don't really want to live in Crook County, do you? I wouldn't want to. Here's Grant. There's a big national forest out here. Many big national forests. Oregon's got, by the way, more timber and timber industry than any other state. Oregon and Washington both state. It's just loaded with evergreen trees. All right, hold on. Okay, I sure hope I remember to turn this right side up in post-production. I know I forgot to do that with my coin video, and then I felt pretty dumb later. But anyway, we're gonna start and go in kind of a loop, starting from down here in southern Oregon up the Highway 5 corridor. And we'll make a little detour over here, part of the way up, and up there, but we'll talk about both. Maybe we'll go all the way up here for some way, and then we'll get all the way to Portland up here, and then we'll go back and take our detour, because I've been up this way, and then we'll go up here to northern Oregon, and then we'll come down the coast and talk about the coast, which is the area I'm actually most familiar with. But first I have my medicine here, a little bit of Merlot. I'm doing that to improve my blood counts, not for any other. I will chase it with a little bit of water, which is called tubig if you're Filipino. Tubig. All right, so let's start down here. As you come up the California Highway 5 Sacramento Valley Agriculture Corridor, you get into some big mountains up here. You go by, what's the name of that town down there? Anyway, it's that town just down here, a little ways this way, is where that psycho Jody Araya lived before she went to Arizona and killed her fiance, well, her ex-boyfriend, I should say. Gotta do a follow-up on her. Anyway, this is like High Plains, and Mount Shasta, that great big snow-capped volcano, is down here, a little ways south of here in California. And as you work your way north, you're coming up through mountains, and there's a big climb. You get up to about 8,000 feet, and it snows a lot here. Let me get my pointer. It snows a lot up here, and then you make this really fast drop down into Ashland, Oregon, which is here. I don't know why it's called Ashland. Maybe one of the big volcano eruptions left it covered in ash sometime in the past. This is Cascade Siskiyou Mountain country. And as you drop down into Ashland, it's quite steep, and trucks can get away. Big heavy trucks that come up here, they have these runaway ramps, so that if they lose their brakes on the steep, long downslope drops many thousands of feet, they can pull off into a escape ramp that's filled with soft gravel and stops the truck that way. Anyway, as you continue north into Medford, this is kind of a big, flat, industrial town. Not the most beautiful town in Oregon, but it's still not a bad place to live because it's surrounded by nature. There's a great big butte here, and things like that. It's got a river that runs through it. You know, the Rogue River Valley is close to here. All right, then you make kind of a westward jaunt here, and you get to Grants Pass, and that's quite close to the Rogue River. Now, Grants Pass is a place that's between two mountain ranges. So what you've got, the big Cascade Range here, it kind of shows you here. Here's Cascade Range. These are big high mountains. with volcanoes that are part of the Ring of Fire volcanoes that go around the Pacific. So Mount Shasta down here in California. And then on this side you have the Coastal Range Mountains that go up here, which is what we live next to. And in between you have various valleys. Here it's all still mountainous, so Grants Pass is up pretty high. But anyway, there's lots to see and do around there, but I haven't seen and done much of it, so I'll pass on describing it. There's a great place as you get close to Myrtle Creek in Canyonville. There's a place here to get sweet rolls, cinnamon rolls. You'll see it from the highway. It'll say world's best cinnamon rolls or something like that, okay? And then as you get up here, there's a big casino, which is a great place. This is about 30 miles south of Roseburg. A big casino called Seven Feathers. They have a big jumping steelhead salmon sculpture out in front with a waterfall. It's a good place to make a rest stop. If you need to use a restroom, get a meal, etc. A couple of gas stations there. Grants Pass is not too bad either. But anyway, this is all evergreen, mountainous. Then you eventually get to Roseburg here. That's an old-time town that's been around a long time. The Umpqua River flows through that town. And the Umpqua, I went and fished there when I was a kid of about 17. Drove up to Roseburg to visit a girlfriend that I had met in the summer. And I went fishing and caught a lot of nice big trout on the Umpqua River. Anyway, it flows eventually all the way down to Reedsport and out into the ocean. And it's a great fishing river throughout its length. There's a route to get, as you keep going, you get to Sutherland. And this is one of the best places to drive out to the coast. If you want to head for the coast, you take Highway 138. It's a beautiful drive. It goes through the mountains and through farmland and pastures with big mountains rising all around you. And then you get to Highway 38 and you go west. And that travels along the Umpqua River through kind of a canyon, and it's quite beautiful until you get to Reedsport. But we won't talk about the coast yet until we're on our way back down, okay? So let's continue up Highway 5. Now you're still in mountains and evergreens until about the time you get to Eugene, here. Eugene is probably the third largest city in Oregon. Unfortunately, we had some violence and damage there, just like in most parts of the country, here and in Portland recently. And we won't discuss that during our relaxation video. But anyway, Eugene is a pretty nice little city, although it's getting less nice lately. From here on up, you have farmland for probably 150 miles. So you have this big valley down in here, like this, on either side of Highway 5, which is, by the way, the biggest, most heavily traveled north-south highway along the West Coast, or on the West Coast. It goes all the way from the northern part of the United States, northern Washington, all the way down to San Diego in the south. to the border of Mexico. So it's the most heavily traveled highway with truck traffic and cars in the western United States. Anyway, this is all farmland, so you might find it just a little bit boring as you head up here, up into the Portland area. Now, let's backtrack. Portland is called the City of Roses, by the way. And they have a big rose festival and things like that. And here you have the capital of Oregon, Salem. This is not where people burned witches, okay? That's on the East Coast. But here's the capital, Salem. It's kind of run down, but it's, not a bad city overall. But let's go all the way back down here for a minute. And I will tell you the route that we took, a loop that we took in the past to check out some of the notable sites in Oregon. One place you have to see is Crater Lake. So when you're down here by Grants Pass or Medford, in this case I remember staying in Medford and going to Crater Lake from there. You take a highway here, you go to Highway 82 or 62, I think this is, yeah. And you go up, and then you take this little highway that heads over to Crater Lake, which is out here. It's a couple hours drive from Medford, I'd say. Maybe an hour and a half. This is one of the deepest lakes in the world. It's at an elevation of 6,000 something feet, but the lake is very deep. And because it's very pure water, all snowmelt. And because it's very deep, it is the bluest of blue, deep blue lakes you will ever see if you happen to be there when the sun is shining. This was a great big giant volcano once upon a time, thousands of years ago, called Mount Mazama. And Mount Mazama exploded with a mighty explosion and blew billions of tons of stuff in all directions and just left this big crater up in the mountains, which subsequently filled with snowmelt and became a lake. And there's a little cinder cone island in it, kind of towards one side, which you can see when you're there. Last time Joanna and I tried to go here, it was in June, which is summertime, which we're now in, but it snowed like crazy, and we could not see the lake from right up on the rim. We were right there on the rim. There's a rim road that goes all the way around the lake, but visibility was so bad in this snow in June, global warming, don't you know, that we couldn't see it. So we're going to go back and take a day trip there one of these days. We'll have to go from out here on the coast and go out here and drop down this way. But anyway, when I was there before, Chelsea, we went halfway around the lake. It was quite gorgeous. We stopped at the lodge and took pictures and so forth. And then, here's a great fishing lake, Diamond Lake, which is the headwaters of the Umpqua River, I do believe. But anyway, so then what we did was, we went out here, Highway 138, and we took this Highway 97. Be quiet, annoying car out there. All right, we took this highway up here through some national forest and parks to Bend, Oregon. There's another town in Oregon called North Bend, which is down here by Coos Bay. But it's strange that it's called North Bend because it's both south of Bend and west of Bend. So I don't know why they called it North Bend. Makes no sense. Anyway, we kept going up through here when we took our trip. I'm going to have to move this down a little so you can see it easier. We'll just move this down, down, and down. And there's some flat land and some forest out here. Then you start heading back west a little bit on this Highway 26. And you go through this area of kind of what you would call Badlands. Warm Springs Indian Reservation. And I would call it Badlands because it's like desert, rocky, interesting terrain. Nice place to visit for photography. It's a little bit like Arizona or Utah, but just in this patch of Oregon, really. So there's a lot of fascinating geological features in Oregon. I gotta have another sip of this and this. The grape and the too big. To keep going here. All right. So now so far I haven't showed you much by way of photos, I know. But be patient, we're getting to that. All right? I promise when we get out to the coast, which I am most familiar with, then we'll start showing you photos. Very quick photos, because I don't want to try to splice in audio stuff here. All right, so if you continue here and take this little Highway 35, you come to the mighty Columbia River, which is the largest river on the west coast by far. And the Columbia is navigable by boats in many areas. So it's deep and it's big. And it's a beautiful drive for you to go from here either east up the Columbia, which is also a route that Amtrak takes, the train, which you can go on to go all the way to Chicago, by the way. You can take Amtrak. But as you get out here, it's pretty bleak and deserty, okay? Or you can go west from this area through the Dalles, and there's all kinds of things to see and do along here. There's parks and state parks and national parks and you name it. There's fishing. Here's the Hood River, and then you can continue on and you get to a place called the Cascade Locks. Good place to stay at a Best Western hotel right there that has a restaurant right next door that's pretty good. And when you stay there, they give you these certificates that are good for a meal each day over at the adjacent restaurant. And that restaurant overlooks the beautiful river and also has a view of the interesting bridge there. Friends, just finishing up yummy lunch, fishing, Alaska pollock
Yummy,
and
yummy.
chips. Toss it up. This is the view from our restaurant window. It's quite a view today.
Bridge of the Gods.
Bridge of the Gods over the Columbia. Called the Bridge of the Gods. And there's a museum on the north side, the Washington side of the Bridge of the Gods. If you cross over and go north a little bit, just a mile or two, there's a great museum there with logging equipment and all kinds of artifacts from the past, an eclectic mixture of stuff. Maybe I'll show you a couple of photos from that museum. We went there a few months ago. My one caveat is trains go back and forth here all night long. So if you're a train buff like me, you don't mind hearing the train noise when you're at the hotel there, the motel, the Best Western. But if you have to have total silence, that's not the place to stay. All right, they're not really loud if you don't have, the windows open. But anyway, so there's a big fish hatchery here to see close by, and down here a little further there's North Bonneville, the great big Bonneville Dam power project, which supplies electricity to huge parts of Oregon going down here. Clean energy that's produced just by the hydropower of the force of the water of the Columbia River. And so we don't even have to burn fossil fuels for our electricity, which is why it's low cost also. We pay a low electric rate, so we don't use natural gas, just electric. All right. And then as you travel more west, you come to Vancouver, Washington, which is a place I used to live way back in the 1980s. But then we had this volcano, Mount St. Helens, that erupted up here in Washington. Look up Mount St. Helens eruption, and you'll see it erupted, and it covered this whole area in thick white ash, gritty silicon bits of ash that would wreck your car if it got into the engine. Nasty stuff. I had to hose it down off my house and driveway and cars and everything. And that was back in the 1980s. The river is quite beautiful. I fished here and caught a salmon, washugal. I fished up the road a ways. I lived in actual Washington state, and I bought a brand new house way back then for $50,000 in this area. We only lived there about 9 months because we were, believe it or not, homesick for Santa Cruz County. That would not happen to me today. But anyway, Portland is a beautiful big city as big cities go. I'm not much of a big city guy, but there's tons to do in Portland. I'll leave it for you to discover all that, because I don't talk about the city sites much, since I try to avoid the big cities these days. But if you continue up, as we did on one of our tours of the Northwest, you can see Mount St. Helens in the distance. Here in Portland, you can see Mount Hood, if it's a clear day. Nice, big, tall volcano, snow-capped most of the year, including all through summer, most of the time, unless it's a really, really hot, dry year. But anyway, you can continue up. If you're on the Oregon side, you can go through Portland and go up this highway, or you can go up into Washington on Highway 5 and cut back over here. This is the way I have to go when I go see my daughter Rachel up in the Seattle area. I can't go there at the moment, but I will when this corona nonsense is all done. But anyway, if you head now out to the coast on Highway 30 and that, you'll go along the Columbia River. It gets bigger and bigger and wider. This is called the Lewis and Clark Highway because those are the guys that came from the east with the help of an Indian guide. What's her name? Was it Hiawatha? There's a statue of her back here someplace. At the Cascade Locks, a beautiful bronze statue of her. She was a young Indian maiden who knew the area well. But anyway, You come out here and you get to the very old town of Astoria. Very picturesque town. And there's this big, scary bridge that if you don't like heights, it's going to freak you out. Narrow, scary bridge that goes from Oregon to Washington over the Columbia River with a beautiful town on this side called Astoria. And so that's a place worth visiting and perhaps staying. Now let's head down the coast. How many minutes have we gone? Quite a bit. Because I'm going to focus more on some of this now, since I'm more familiar with the coastal terrain. By the way, if you're in Portland, there are several nice routes over to the coast. You can take Highway 26 and go this way. You can take this more scenic but slower route, Highway 6, go this way. You can swing down Highway 18, it goes through kind of orchard and mountainous and pasture area and get out to the coast here. Lots of good ways to do it, but if you're up in Astoria, you are now going to embark on one of the most beautiful drives on earth as you head south, because it almost always is along coastal areas where you can see the ocean and things like that. And Oregon has tons and tons of state beaches and federal parks and county beaches and parks and so forth. One of the most popular destinations for people is Cannon Beach. There's a great big giant rock that comes out of the water there that all the seabirds nest on and everything. It raises up hundreds of feet in the air or something. It's a nice big long flat beach, but it's a little bit too touristy for my taste. And it's also a little bit too crowded for my taste. It's one of the favorite destinations of Portlanders. And I don't know how many people live here, but it's probably 500,000 or something in these Portland, Salem areas. Maybe more. I haven't looked. But anyway, this is a nice area of coast to visit. But I prefer the coast further south. Now, as you head south, you're in the Tillamook area. And when you get down here past this big bay, Garibaldi Bay, you get to the area in town called Tillamook. Tillamook has this big dairy farm right next to the highway that's become a huge destination for people to go to because they have a restaurant there. They have tours of their cheese factory. This whole area has been known as really excellent dairy farming for milk and cheese out here. Lots of beautiful pasture land surrounded by green mountains and such. But anyway, it's worth stopping there for some Tillamook ice cream or a restaurant meal. Tour their facility. I believe it's free. So far as I can recall, we went there a few months ago. I've been there a couple of times. I went there when I was younger in the 1990s, and it's become much, much bigger. And it's an impressive thing to look at their facility and their cheese making operation, which they'll easy to tour, foot tour. You don't have to do a guide or anything. You just walk around and look at it through these big windows. So there's an aircraft museum there for certain types of older aircraft. That's interesting. All right, then we start heading further south along the coast, and you get out to the coast proper here. Pacific City. Niskayuna is a real nice place to visit. lots of nice, lots of great rugged beach and cliffs and sightseeing, photography opportunities, birds, fishing, whatever you want there. Okay, then you can head south to Lincoln City. Lincoln City is a kind of a long stretch of 4 or 5 miles of town. Used to be a bunch of little towns, and then they just kind of incorporated them all and called them Lincoln City. And there's a big casino here, which is where I went and played the semi-annual poker tournaments. I've played there 3 times now and done great each time. So I have fond memories. There's no poker at the moment, because how do you social distance when you're all handling the same cards and the same chips and you're right next to each other at a table, right? So at the moment, there's no poker. But it's a worthy place to stay in that area, because there's so many places to go from there. There's lakes and there's trails by the score. All right, then you can head south. All these state parks are worth visiting. You can see all the names. There's so many I can't even talk about all of them. Some of these areas have agates. Many, almost all of them, have beautiful trails. Some have streams, good beaches. Some are rugged, rocky beaches, and some are nicer ones. You get down to Newport, which is probably the biggest town on the coast, except for maybe Coos Bay. I don't know which one is bigger. It's kind of a little bit old and run down, Newport, but good restaurants and things like that. When you get south of Newport, just a few miles, there's a great place to stop on the west side of the highway. You can't miss it if you're looking for fresh crab, seafood, and so forth that you can eat outside at tables or inside. And they're cooking it all right there in front of you. And you'll see it. I don't remember the name, but you can't miss it. All right. Then as you head further south, again, tons of great state parks. Ona Beach, Seal Rock, you name it, it's there. You get to Waldport, which is a real nice little town. I prefer Waldport over Newport, but it's quite a bit smaller. It's a beautiful town to stop, and you can stay there. It has one of those mini bridges that we have in Oregon that were built in the 1930s as part of the Great Works projects, Art Deco style bridges, built by the guys that were put to work in that era. As you get further south, you get to the town of Yachats, which is an artist community. Nice little town to stop for a meal or something like that, but don't expect inexpensive prices. In that town, it's kind of an upscale artist community. But when you get immediately south of Yachats, this little section here, you're going to be in one of the most interesting sections of Oregon coast that you'll ever see. Neptune Beach, Cape Perpetua. Definitely stop at Cape Perpetua or Perpetua, depending. It's perpetually there. It's a place where you can whale watch, walk on great trails. There's a stream there. There's these interesting features like the spouting horn, where the waves come in and it blows up through this little cavern thing. kinds of stuff like that. And you'll see it. It's hard to miss. It's a little bit difficult to get a parking spot because there's a little tiny parking lot there. Just be patient, or go a little bit further and try to find a place in a turnout. All right. So as we head south from there, several more great state parks. Here is a must-see, right here. The Heseta Head Lighthouse Viewpoint. I have to sip water, guys. This is one of our favorite places to go. It's a state park. You park down in a parking lot by a beautiful beach, and then you can walk up this trail to the lighthouse, and you can get a tour of the lighthouse up at the top. You have to climb a ways to get up there, but it's not too bad. It's a nice 15-minute, walk or so up a hill through a gorgeous trail of ferns and a creek and trees, and with views of the ocean on all sides. There's a great big giant rock here with seabirds nesting on it, and then you get up to the picturesque, the original facilities there where the lighthouse keepers stayed. There's a bed and breakfast there, but you need reservations, I think, in a year in advance or something. And then you go further up to the lighthouse itself, and you can get a lot of good info on what life was like 100 years ago for the folks that tended this lighthouse back in the days it was oil-fired. Don't miss that. It's something, it's the most photographed point on the Oregon coast also, by the way, because when you get a little bit further south, you can see it along the highway in these big turnouts along Highway 101. And you can photograph it from a distance that way and see it up on its cliff, way up on its cliff. All right, then we get further south. We get to Florence. Beautiful town with a beautiful waterfront. Great places to eat along the waterfront. You can go to Moe's, which is kind of a chain, coastal seafood restaurant chain with 7 or 8 locations in the Pacific Northwest, and get a table right next to the water for the Siuslaw River. Or there are several other restaurants there that you can look up the reviews on and see where you might like to eat. And when you get south of Florence, you're getting to the big dunes areas. In fact, there's a town here called Dune City. All the dune runners from the cities like to come out with their RVs and their dune buggy vehicles, their OHVs is what they're called, and do duning from here all the way down to Coos Bay. Reedsport is another area where I used to live in Reedsport. There's tons of great dune places to go here if you're into that, and you can rent those, of course. Or just south of Florence, you can do tours where they put you on a big dune buggy that seats 8 or 10 people, and they take you out and go flying over the dunes and that. All right, so continuing on south, we come to, let's backtrack a minute, back to Florence. If you were to head east from Florence, up Highway 126, okay, you get to a town called Mapleton, right here. And if you were then crossing the bridge and then making a direct turn back on the other side of the Siuslaw River, you could go to Silver Creek Falls, several miles up this way. Look it up, Silver Creek Falls, or is it Sweet Creek Falls? It's either Sweet Creek Falls or Silver Creek Falls. Anyway, it is one of the most beautiful hikes you will ever take in your life. You hike for about 45 minutes, continuously climbing up, I think it's Sweet Creek, up Sweet Creek, and it's one little waterfall after another, after another, after another, in absolutely gorgeous, unspoiled territory, until you finally get to the main falls all the way up at the end of the trail. It's not difficult to do, and it's a moderate, what you would call a moderate hike, and then you can backtrack. Thankfully, it's downhill all the way back to the parking area, so don't miss that Sweet Creek Falls Trail. I hesitate to even tell you about it because it's so beautiful and unspoiled, but if any of my subbies are fortunate enough to come out to see the Oregon coast, I want them to know about it. I just don't want the rest of the world to know about it. All right, so now we can head south. Again, a very nice drive, unspoiled, to Reedsport, which is an old fishing and lumber town. It's kind of being renovated now. They've redone the old part of the main street. They have a great area along the Umpqua River for boats to launch, and there's a couple of decent little restaurants in Reedsport, several. A great Chinese restaurant, by the way, Chinese food, at the south end of town called Ocean Garden. Anyway, if you want to see a beautiful area east of Reedsport, drive just a few miles up Highway 38, only about 3 or 4 miles, and you'll come to where all these elk, there's a big elk preserve up along the Umpqua River, and you can just pull your car over into a parking lot, especially in the early morning or late evening towards sundown. You'll see all these elk out here, and it's a preserve for them, the elk. And that's an interesting thing to see. Then you can come back down, go a little south of town to Winchester Bay. Great little bay town with a marina, boats, fishing, campgrounds, places for the off-road vehicles to go to the sand dunes. And if you go down there, there's a great lighthouse here, the Umpqua Lighthouse, which flashes white and red alternately. One of the few lighthouses that does that. A little museum there by the lighthouse, and a great view overlook of the ocean where you can see the Umpqua River flowing into the ocean. You can see, we saw dolphins there last time we looked there, but you can see whales sometimes going by, things like that. Then you can take a drive south through a nice forested area, and you'll get to Coos Bay. This is a real old port town. Ships come in. Lumber town. You'll still see huge amounts of lumber activity going on there, and plenty of good places to eat. They have a walkway in town next to the river. There's kind of a train museum area and things like that. It's a really old, picturesque town. Lots of shops and things. All right. And then one of our favorite towns as we go south from Coos Bay is Bandon. Don't miss Bandon, whatever you do. Bandon's got some great agate hunting. They've got a great beach that overlooks all these big rocky seamounts coming up out of the ocean in all different shapes. One looks like the Madonna or an Indian woman or something. All different kinds of things there to see. Great little shops and restaurants downtown. If you're a couple, you'll enjoy, well, the female side of you will enjoy that part. Okay, I know, yeah, sexist, right? So, anyway, great place to stay, unspoiled little town, and lots of gorgeous stuff around there. A fantastic state park just north of Bandon called Bullard's Beach. So if you go out to Bullard's Beach State Park, there's just miles and miles of unspoiled beach, sand dunes, driftwood. The river comes in there, the Coquille River, I think it is. And there's a lighthouse there too, a small one. And you can have a mini tour of that place when it's open. All right. Then as you head south from Bandon, you'll be kind of inland a little bit. You won't be able to see the ocean. Oh look, you're in Europe now. Here's a town called Denmark. We actually stayed here in Langlois at a bed and breakfast there. Nice place to stay. Not too expensive either. Gorgeous area again of unspoiled Oregon coast. You're going to get to Port Orford down here. And from here south, you're going to see the most incredible, rugged, and picturesque section of the Oregon coast ever. So you can look some of it up on Google Images or YouTube, Port Orford. I don't know if I'll have time to put all the photographs in this video that I want to put in. I might do that in a future video where we're reviewing something like this, the Oregon coast. All right, and maybe I'll show you some of that. Where is this one, for example? Pistol River, State Beach. That's south of Port Orford. Down here, down there. Some of the places, let's see here. We can do this kind of. Here's Cape Perpetua I was telling you about. Sea anemones that are in, well, there's another great place, a big lighthouse just south or just north of Newport. So don't forget about that one. Just north of Newport, you have a big lighthouse area. And I think it's called Yaquina Head. That's it, Yaquina Head Lighthouse. And that's well worth visiting. But anyway, those are the kind of vistas you're going to see all the time on the Oregon coast. And these are the bridges I was telling you about that are Art Deco. There are several of them along the Oregon coast that are this style of bridge here. Oh, you can't see it because I would have to turn it around the other way. I'll show you in a photo of one. Old shipwreck there. Here you can see the scary bridge I was telling you about that goes across from Astoria in the northern part of Oregon, across the Columbia River and down into Washington State. Itinerary Astoria to Warrenton. Let's see if they have any other good photos. The things I've been talking to you about. I think I have to do a whole separate. Here is the lighthouse that I was telling you, which is Heseta Head. Okay, and that's the big giant rock. The ocean actually comes down on the other side here. You can't see it from here. There's a trail that goes way up above the lighthouse also. Definitely walk up and get the view from above if you have the energy, because it's a great trail. A lot of fresh fish along the Oregon coast of all kinds. Anyway, while we were in, this is Moe's, one of the locations. While we were in, where were we? Bandon. Okay, there's a great little fish and chips place along the waterfront there. You'll see it. You can't miss it. Definitely eat there. There's only a few little tables inside, so you usually have to take it outside with you and try to go at a time that's not peak, because at peak times you're going to be waiting, okay? So that's the same with that crab place I was telling you up here by Newport. Anyway, after you get south of Bandon, as I mentioned, down here to Port Orford, from there down to the California coast is the most amazing, rugged, and spectacular area, I think, of the Oregon coast. Lots of great places to stop. You're going to want to stop and do photography, look at the sea life, do some hiking, you name it. And there's a couple of big towns along here where you can stop for meals or whatever, namely Gold Beach, where I didn't find my fortune in gold, but Gold Beach, and then Brookings, just before the border with California. There's a big river that is it the Rogue River, I believe, that dumps in here at Brookings. So, yeah. That kind of completes our tour. I could have spent hours on this, but then my software wouldn't accommodate the video footage because it can only handle about an hour and 20 minutes worth before it crashes. So otherwise it doesn't like the amount of memory consumption. This should be long enough to put you to sleep, especially if I splice in some photos. Then it'll be like watching somebody's home movie or something. All right, everyone. When I feel better, I'll make more videos. I will start up my other ASMR channel as well soon. Working on that now, but I gotta get better first. I look a mess at the moment because of the chemo, but not to worry. It's going to get better. It's a normal effect, and it's going to wear off because I don't have to take that one now for many months. That second one that does this to me. So I'll feel better, I'm quite sure, in a few weeks. All right, take care, everyone. Don't ASMR and drive, and stay safe and healthy and well. Bye-bye.